edition of Economic Update, a weekly program devoted to the economic dimensions of our lives: jobs, debts, incomes, those for our kids, and those looming down the road. I'm your host, Richard Wolff. I've been an economist, a professor of economics all my adult life, and I believe that has prepared me to present to you the kinds of economic analyses and updates that this program specializes in. The Commodities Futures Trading Commission. You may never have heard this. It's a well-established commission of the United States government in Washington. One of its activities is to supervise the financial markets. That is, the markets in derivatives and other fancy but very important mechanisms of the financial world, the world of banks, what banks do, how they trade with one another, what risks they take, for what kinds of returns, what products they develop in their offices, and so on. And on the 25th of September, this last week, it was announced by them, by the Commodities Futures Trading Commission, that they were changing their policy. They were going to change the policy inherited from the Obama administration to make it suitable for the new Trump administration. And before I tell you what they've done, because it will be right up there in the "you can't be serious" category, before I tell you, it's an important example, I guess that's the word I want, an example of what is happening mostly below the radar. In other words, we have a president who makes a spectacular speech or a spectacular tweet and gets a lot of attention and hoopla and people yelling and screaming for him, against him, and all the rest. But meanwhile, most of the business of government isn't that. It's what is done in these commissions and offices and departments of this or that part of the government, changing the rules, applying them in a different way. That's what's really shifting America. And in a way, that has more impact on people than what the particular head of the government might be saying or yelling or tweeting, etc. As going on everywhere, I want to give you one example. So let's get back to the Commodities Futures Trading Commission. It announced it is now going to rely less on directly supervising the banking industry, excuse me, and I'm now going to quote, it's going to put more reliance on banks, here comes the quote, self-reporting of their own misdeeds. I have to say that again because probably you don't believe what I just said, so I want to say it again. The Commodities Futures Trading Commission, in the words of its chair, is changing its policy to rely more on banks' self-reporting of their own misdeeds. He gave a speech, the director did, in which he said there are a lot of incentives for the banks to be open and transparent about what they do. Folks, you know from this program, if you've been listening, that I have tried to catalog for you over the last several years the extraordinary misdeeds carried out by the large banks in this country. Money laundering, for which they have been found guilty and paid huge fines. Manipulating global interest rates, the so-called LIBOR scandal, for which they have been found guilty and paid fines. Overcharging all kinds of fees, from bounced checks to everything else, for which they have been found guilty and have paid fines. For having misbehaved in the whole mortgage crisis back in 2007, 8, and 9, for which they have been found guilty, and they've paid heavy. We have seen, and money exchange, the foreign exchange markets, they manipulated those. Everything the major banks have done, they have behaved badly, unethically, and or illegally, paid huge fines, failed to self-report. For the government now to say we're going to rely on self-reporting, it boggles the mind, if I wish I could come up with a better phrase. But it tells you something fundamental, that after all the hoopla is done, this government is doing something for its friends. And if you don't notice it doing much for you, draw your own conclusions.